You are live.
Okay. Good morning. I'd like to call the joint meeting of the Personnel, Administration and Higher Education Committee and also the Finance Committee. Chairman Leggett.
Yep, call the finance committee to order.
Okay.
We have.
Yes, you do.
Okay. First item that we have on the agenda is privilege of the floor and public comment. Not seeing any. Move to the action agenda, which is discussion. There's no action. There's discussion items. There's discussion regarding the proposed changes to SUNY Adirondack funding formula. That's the purpose of the meeting today. There's some calculations within the agenda. And there's another sheet.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
I'm not, since this is a contractual matter and also a negotiating matter, I think that at some point before we. I think we should go to executive session on this. I'm not saying there doesn't need to be some discussion, but I guess what I'm saying is we're going to get into particulars of contractual matter that we have with another party. And given the implications of this from a person, I think we need to be discussing this and also from a negotiating.
I would have to ask.
Can you identify who the other party is?
Sure. Right now, our funding of the college is based on a contractual relationship between Warren County and Washington.
That's the pleasure of the joint committee today. That would be an appropriate basis for executive session.
Okay, but I think first we have to decide, is this something that we want to do? Because if we don't want to do it, then there's really no point in discussing numbers and all the rest of it. Yes.
Mr. Chairman, if we could ask the president of the college to come up, because this is per request, and in your agendas here, you see that the Board of Trustees had passed a resolution for the sponsorship share to go up to 15% of operating revenue. So just get us all on the same page. Perhaps if we could have President Duffy come up and inform us a little bit of this idea. Sure. President Duffy, would you mind?
Not at all. Good after, yeah, I did it. Good morning.
You can go right up to
Sit
that
down,
laptop
whatever.
on that podium there.
That'd be better.
Thank you. Yes.
Well, thank you for bringing this forward once again to have this conversation. We appreciate it. We had a little bit of this. When did we talk? Back in October, November, and was in traffic. So shared quite a bit of information at that point, but just as a recap, your sponsor contribution, of course, helps us to operate the college. And over time, we talked to each of the boards to request that you consider increasing your contribution to be in line with our peer average and our peer institutions, most of them actually a little bit smaller than SUNY Adirondack. And the average sponsor contribution is about 15% of their operating budget. And traditionally, between Warren and Washington County, we contribute about 12% of our budget. So almost 2.5 years ago, we started these conversations to consider how each county might want to rethink their contribution distribution. That's a decision that's made between the two counties. It's not what the college determines. It's what the counties determined back in 1961 when the college was created. And so, part of the conversations that we've been having over time by providing some data to each of the county leaders is to consider how over a period of time, whatever that time frame is determined by you, to reach that 15% of our operating budget in a reasonable amount of time. Just like every other organization, our costs go up and our funding has remained relatively flat, if not declining. And so it makes it difficult to be able to continue to have the support systems that our students need to be successful. And so with a combination of both a potential increase from our sponsor contributions, our continued advocacy work with the state to increase their contribution, which I'm happy to say that we're off to a good start in terms of our lobbying efforts with our state legislators. We've met with several of them this past 2 weeks to ask for increased aid from the state at a time when workforce challenges are evident all across every industry, and community colleges can play such a critical role in helping to address some of those workforce challenges. We're asking the state as well as our sponsors to consider an increase. So I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm not sure what information might be helpful for you at this point. But you know, we at least appreciate the opportunity for you to get together to discuss this. And we stand ready to help in whatever way or provide any additional data that might be helpful.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. President Duffy, would there be a ripple effect throughout the college's budget, especially on a revenue side, if the 2 counties did increase up to 15%?
So even if you look at some of the figures that you have here, I mean, over time, an accumulation of more funding would help us to potentially offset some of the declines that we've had in other funding. Just like we all have cost of living adjustments, part of it is just keeping up with being able to the amount of employees that we have over the past several years. We've made several cuts to our staffing to accommodate for declines in enrollment. But I'm happy to say that we're starting to see some ticks up again, which is a really good sign, and hopefully returning to a different level of enrollment than what we've seen during the pandemic and even during the last few years. So it will have an impact in terms of being able to create more opportunities to sustain college. Our stimulus funds are what are closing our gap right now. And like everyone else, those stimulus funds will run out. And we have about $1 million deficit in our budget. And that's after making pretty significant reductions in workforce over the past several years.
And this would be seen at a student level. What would the impact be on student tuition through the years if we increase or do not increase?
So when we projected out our long-term financial, if everything remained the same, the only real place the college has any control in terms of increased revenues through student tuition. And so if our funding remains level or even declines from the state as well as our local sponsors, the only place we have to gain any additional revenue is through tuition increases. So the scenarios that we ran over several periods of time for the counties to consider is that at level funding, we would have to keep increasing tuition 3, 4, 5, 6, 7% over time just to keep up with expenses. By sharing the pain, as Anne-Marie likes to call it, where we all contribute a little bit more, we can keep that tuition increase at a lower rate, potentially, be able to not put the burden on the backs of students, which is currently the highest percentage of our operating aid. So it would help us to reduce increases in tuition.
Any other question? Yes.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Chris. I'm looking at the sponsored contributions and student revenue. What do our students pay for whatever as compared to your peer group of other students?
We compare every year to all 30 campuses, and we generally have been falling 6th or 7th from the bottom, meaning one of the lowest tuition rates. So we charge, I think this year it's just about $5,100 for a full-time student for the full year. And that still ranks us towards the bottom third of our community college sector. So we've done a good job of being able to contain that cost as much as possible. And again, having the students bear the brunt of the expenses.
Supervisor Bramer?
Thanks. Thank you, Chairman. Dr. Duffy, I know that you've been asking for this increase in a long time. And one of the things that I'm concerned about is the 5 years is not a very long time in the financial world of the county, and I'm wondering if you, in doing these, I'm assuming your office was provided some assistance in doing these calculations out for the 5 years. When you're doing your financial forecasting, did you look at, or how far out do you normally look for financial forecasting?
3 to 5 years is
3 to
about
5.
the best we can do, and even that is a long time in this world. In terms of projecting enrollment, projecting where our revenues are coming from, so 3 to 5 years is what we've been focused on.
Okay, any other questions?
You know, as far as the discussion going forward, we've prepared some spreadsheets that based on recommendations from our last meeting. We'd like to put them out there. I'm not sure if they're, you know, it's open discussion. I don't know if we're at a point for an executive.
Well, if I can clarify on that for one moment, I had a chance to catch up. Under FOIL, there might be some exemptions that would apply for contracts. But under the open meetings law, the only specific exemption is for collective bargaining negotiations between an employer and a public employee. So the ability of this joint committee to go into an executive session for the purposes of discussing what was put forth as a contract with another county, in my opinion, does not meet the requirements for executive session under the open meetings law. And I could continue if there's a need for me to continue, but I'll pause for a moment and see if there's questions concerning that opinion. Apologize for my
Yes,
earlier
super.
misstatement.
Yep, Supervisor Burnham.
Thank you. I guess just kind of pivoting from that, these sheets, 2 of these sheets were included with the attachments, so they are, you know, out there on the agenda on the public website. And I certainly understand, you know, the current projected sponsor contributions, assuming a 2% growth per year, that's pretty clear. What I don't understand is where we came up with, you know, who provided, I think Craig worked on this when he was acting administrator, and you know, why are we going with assuming a 6.5% increase per year? And then looking at the bottom of that second sheet, not the third sheet, it says in the text, we do so with the idea of keeping Washington counties out of year cost projections flat. Why is Washington County getting to keep their increases flat, knowing that at the meeting that we had with them at the college, I don't know when that was, September, they did say they were going to be looking at this also, weren't they? To increase theirs as well. I don't think it's fair that we should have to increase above our normal 2% when they're not doing that. But I don't think that's what they're doing, right? Have we talked to them? Are they going forward?
I don't think anybody's doing anything at the moment.
If I can clarify on what we have, Mr. Chairman, before us in our packet, call it old information. And that was what was provided at our last meeting. The handout that you have just received is the new information to be presented at this meeting. So the old one did show that as flat. That was not acceptable. So we went back to the drawing board to see what an alternative would be. And the purpose of that meeting is to present that idea and see where the supervisors will go, if anywhere. And we'd be willing to explain the handout when we, and if we get to that point.
That's Supervisor Burnham.
Thanks, Chairman. Well, I did ask for a copy of this, I don't know, a couple weeks ago. So if this is the newest iteration just today, I think we should go over it. And I don't understand all of this stuff looking at it.
Well, I'm still on the question do we want to do this? Do we want to go to 50%? Whatever the formula may end up being, whether it's, 66% Warren County and the remainder of Washington County, or some combination, or it's full-time equivalents, or some combination. Yes,
Yeah, I'm prepared to consider increasing our contribution for from present levels to some future level. I'm not sure if we can obligate future boards to that, but relative to the budget, but in terms of the intent, I think that's something that, I'm prepared to consider. Now, how we do that, that's subject to discussion and the details of discussion, but I think that the idea being that there's can be no doubt it would put the college on a much better footing. It would increase our revenue from students from outside the county that attend our county. Be nice to see that impact. It would nice to see the numbers on that impact. That would be good information to provide. So I'm willing to think about that going forward. I think that some amount of the increase is going to be there anyway. So, I mean, of that there can be no doubt. So the question is always the differential, right? In other words, that's just going to be some escalation, of course. And then the question is, how much more than that? And I think there's, if for those that have seen the business plan of the college, this is really well prepared, exceptional business plan. My compliments to the president and your staff, I think, and the board. As an excellent, helps keep the college on a financial footing that I think it needs to be in. So that's my thinking at this point in time. And just one other thing in terms of the idea of a user formula, a student formula, as opposed to an assessed value. I think that on the final page of the handout, if you look all the way to the bottom, they show the percentages based on equalization full value. They show us on equalization is 67.9. And they show the student enrollment at 57.4. So it's important to understand that difference is. It's important to understand that difference. Now, how it's applied, when it's applied, etc. That's all subject to discussion.
Supervisor Brammer.
Thank you. Just on the conceptual question, I am in support of giving the college more support, financial support. Than our 2% standard increase. Like I said earlier, I do think that these projections are a little bit too aggressive for us as a county over 5 years. If we were looking more like out 10 years to get us to the 15%, I wish we had started this 5 or 10 years ago. I've been on the board now several years and we've been hearing this every single time, but we are where we are now. So I'm in support of looking at a formula. I do recall that not just myself, but others, maybe my colleague from Bolton, as he just sort of alluded to, have concerns about us, Warren County, going forward with the increase based on full value, our value of the properties. When we see that our enrollment is closer to the 57, not 67. And I think we said that last time, so I'm a little bit concerned that we are looking at formulas that are only based on the full value. And yes, I understand that maybe we have a little bit more ability than Washington County to increase our percentage, but let's do that voluntarily, not based on a formula that links us to property values that that we'll have a hard time changing later. I guess is my point.
Okay. Does
Oh,
anyone?
I have one more that I'd like us to consider. I don't know if we can get there today, but one thing that is important to me is that we do keep the student tuition costs down. So if we do this, can we put something in that binds the college not to increase the student tuition costs over, say, 3% each year?
We probably can, Does anyone else have a objection to increasing to 15%? Whatever the formula may be. Well, obviously, the devil's in the details and but conceptually, are we all supportive of that?
I'm supportive of an agreement. It may not be 15% right away. But I'm in definitely support of an agreement. And Mr. Chairman, I just did some quick math. If we continue our 2% growth per year, then we're actually providing less of that 15% every year. So the difference in 23-24 is like 1.2 million. If you get up to 27-28, it's 1.3 million. So we're actually going and providing less of that budget. So we definitely need to do something to increase our contribution.
Yes.
Yeah, I think, my thinking right now is that the existing arrangement could possibly be the base of an arrangement, and that the discussion could center on the increase. And that my point in pointing out the difference between population and assessed value would be that the additional cost would be the differential, would be on the 10%, you follow? In other words, that would be something that the devil's in the details, but that would be something that I think was worthy of consideration. And so the existing contract arrangement would stay in force based on population. But the increase going forward could possibly be adjusted to some other arrangement. I'm not saying it has to be what's in front of us right now, but it's something that we could look at. But in either way, once you have a commitment to some dollar amount, let's say for the sake of discussion, $2 million. Right now, our share of that would be, would be something like yeah, it's shown on your sheet. It's as in 5 years, 908 to 428. You see that? And under the existing arrangement, it would be our end would be 767. So you can see the difference, 767 as opposed to 908. I think my numbers are correct. So the dollar amount is, I think, to keep in mind is what the differential is, not what the dollar amount is, because if you're committed to bringing the college to a certain point, that's the dollar amount. The question is, how is it apportioned? And then it becomes, what's the differential? And is that something that we think we want to do? And why do we want to do it? And on that subject, it would seem to me, as you know, the capital items at college are based on assessed value. And right now, I guess one way to characterize it is it would be more right now is more on a user basis, like sewer, water, right? You use it, you pay for it. Whereas what's under consideration is that some amount, at least in my mind, of the increase, do we want to consider shifting that to from a student system to an assessed system, and if so, how much?
Yes, Supervisor Seaver.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for affording me an opportunity to ask a few questions, if that would be all right. I know I came in a few minutes late and got construction and accidents right out front all morning. Would that be, did you already go through my questions?
I looked at them, yeah.
But I mean here today?
No.
Okay, can I just ask a couple of them?
Sure.
Thank you. Dr. Duffy, before we had this meeting, I was under the misconception it was a few weeks earlier, so I did develop some questions. I don't know if anyone forwarded that on to you. Seemed to be publicly disseminated, so I don't think it's anything that needs to be an executive session, but first and foremost, just for the record, I have had an opportunity to meet with our county attorney and to review whether or not I have any conflicts in having this dialogue. As you know, I do not work for SUNY Adirondack. I do not hold a position with your college. I work for SUNY Plattsburgh. I do not have a conflict in voting or debating on this topic, and I just want to put that up front before that becomes an issue in my questions. I do think that if there's some way that we can afford some type of a modest increase, that we should always do what we can to support education. But I'm conflicted on the side of how that impacts our taxpayers in Warren County and proportionately or in respect to Washington County. And to the points that have been made this morning, I do recall a time that years ago when we were talking about this, we said, let's find a way to increase our contribution for capital projects. And we did that. We pay more than Washington County in that respect and in other respects where we have been able to contribute. You know, I frequently get emails from SUNY and their current data continues to say that 50% of full-time in-state undergraduates will pay $0 after financial aid. That there are tremendous amounts of state dollars that are invested in tuition and fees for students attending college, particularly in a SUNY or in the community college world. I think that's really important as this board continues to talk about how much it will be out of a student's pocket. Because when I look at the numbers of individuals that are hired at SUNY Adirondack, there seems to be a large number of administrators and members hired versus faculty that are teaching those classes. And perhaps that's just to keep the college rolling. But when I look at your 10-year plan and I see us still going through purchasing of properties and contributing in other ways that Warren County contributes more than Washington, I have to stop and think how is what we're doing moving forward fair to our taxpayers? And looking at a user, I see Ron stepped out and I'm sure whatever I say won't influence how he feels about it. But, you know, upon looking at some of the data and what we've done historically, my question is more about when we're increasing that sponsorship that we're seeing other counties pay for their students to come to Warren County and Washington County. That doesn't go towards that match money, correct? It doesn't, while it would cost more for students to come from out of county here, that county, just like we pay other counties when our students go there, that doesn't count towards our sponsorship money. That's separate and apart.
Yes and no. It
Okay.
counts as what the state considers to be local share, which includes both your sponsoring counties and whatever chargebacks, which is what you're referring to.
Okay.
But does it directly impact counting Warren and Washington County? No, because it comes from a separate,
Okay.
money. Just to clarify too, if I heard this, I'm not sure if this was a question, but when other counties, just like you do, pay for their students to come to us, they not only contribute an operating chargeback, but they also contribute a capital chargeback, which the sponsoring counties do not, only on a one-off basis, you know, for certain projects.
But our investments towards capital projects have historically been more than Washington County, correct? Based on our formula.
Because the formula that is based on the assessed value, yes.
So my point being is, it's not like we're not paying more in some respects than Washington County. The question becomes, do we want to continue to always pay more than Washington County? And looking at the data that was presented at the last meeting, and again, I just picked up your data for this meeting. There was some information in there about sales tax, but it was significantly older. I'd like to see new information on sales tax and how that, and you know, what impact that has on Warren versus Washington County as it relates to the college. Because you had specifically mentioned that there was more sales tax that we're benefiting from in Warren County than Washington County because of the college. But I think that was from 2010.
No, it was 2016, 17 was last time we did an economic impact study. I think that's what you're referring to.
And I know that, you know, it's tough looking at enrollments and trying to look at the bigger picture, and SUNY Adirondack has been great with having SUNY Empire as a virtual college and SUNY Plattsburgh as a branch campus, and being able to partner with different entities within both Warren and Washington counties. But I still find myself in a position of trying to say, this is what's fair and just for the Warren County residents paying taxes versus the Washington County residents paying taxes for their local community. And I do think this board has gone and many times above and beyond trying to support the college, but we have such limited say in how the dollars are actually spent with the Board of Trustees. By the time this comes to our board, it's approved through your Board of Trustees. It's debated at length. I know a lot of discussions go on behind the scenes, but it just seems to me that if it was something we could have afforded this year, you would have seen the budget officer putting it into the budget like he did many other things that we had to have in the budget for this year with positions and different services. I worry that in a year from now, you'll all make this decision and we're going to see a significant increase to the budget next year. And we'll be in that same spot of either exceeding a tax cap or getting close to it and having our residents pay more. And a big reason will be that increased contribution to the college. I just think that if this is the type of formula we're looking to go towards, I don't know how we all explain it to our constituents as opposed to Washington County's constituents when we're already paying more in other areas. And as much as I want to support education, this is a concern. And it's one that I think our taxpayers are going to have a lot of questions about. So I did send on a list of questions. I don't know if they'll be helpful or not. I certainly can send them to Dr. Duffy, but if this board's moving forward with an increase, regardless, I don't see how those questions will even be helpful. But I just know at the end of the day, our students are able to obtain and apply for so many grants and so many scholarships that if the idea here is to lower the cost to the student, and we just did this with, some ARPA dollars, we're continuing to look at ARPA dollars, the one-time gap, but I think it disproportionately impacts our residents here, or at least from my perspective in Queensbury. And it's a tough balance, and I just want to be upfront and honest about that. And I'd like to see education supported across the board, but I do see a huge contribution from the state that's going on to all tuition, any resident or any individual that attends college here locally. So thank you for the numbers, and y'all look forward to looking at them, but I can send you all those questions.
Can I just clarify it?
Yes, please.
As far as your statement around hiring more administrators and faculty, I just want to clarify some of that data. We have 92 full-time faculty and we have 74 full-time administrators. So, and actually SUNY Adirondack has one of the highest percentage of full-time faculty in all of the 30 community colleges, and certainly far above our peers. So, and in fact, most of the administrative positions that we've hired over the past 4 years have been grant funded. So when you look at our total budget, a significant number of our administrators, which are hired through grants, mostly around support services to try to help more students become successful, are all grant funded. And so those actually don't come out of the operating budget. And those are positions we'll have to consider when the grant runs out, like all grants do. But I have to say that from a retention standpoint, we just ran our data from last fall to this fall. And this is a very unusual data point. We're really proud of it, is that we've actually closed the gap of the difference between students who are low income and those students who are not, and retaining them. And that is really unheard of for all of higher education. And in fact, in 1 year, we went up 8% in our retention rate of students who receive Pell. So those support services are really important to us. And we've been able to leverage grants to do that. When those grants run out, we don't have those funds. The second point I wanted to make was about retention and faculty.
Just to be clear, 92 full-time, 72 full-time faculty, 92 full-time.
92 full-time faculty, 74, I think is the number, but please don't know, around there, administrators. So, I would say that the support services that we have are really important to help our students be successful. As far as state aid, in terms of grants for students like TAP, which is the tuition assistance program, yes, many students can use that to cover their tuition costs. But not all students, you have to qualify for those, even though the cap on the salary has increased slightly. There are still students that don't, receive TAP, of course. And we always are reminded that it's all the other costs that students have to incur to be able to go to college. So it's not just their tuition costs. And we've seen over and over again that financial barriers are the #1 reason why students drop out. So although, yes, the conversation here does have some impact on tuition, we're also looking at all the other ways that we're trying to support students to remove those financial barriers. So, we utilize funds from our foundation to provide our community hub, support services, gas cards, food, everything, you name it, we're doing that.
So that discussion that Supervisor Bramer brought up about having, if there is an increase, having that go directly towards reducing the tuition for the student, that's possible then to do.
I just want to point out that, let's say your increase, let's say your increase is $100,000. That $100,000 is not going to reduce tuition for all students. And you think about, from a revenue standpoint, tuition, and I wish I had the budget with me, but tuition, is, calculates to around $8 million. $100,000 isn't going to drastically reduce the tuition cost. So I want to be realistic about it. We would appreciate any support. It's a combination of all resources that really help build our budget, with the county support being the smallest of those. So any increase is going to just help us level set a little bit. But there's not a one-to-one correlation. I mean, I would be lying if I tried to propose it that way. There's not a one-to-one correlation of, if you give us 100,000, now we can reduce tuition or, not increase it at all. But over time, if all these things work together, if we get more state aid, if we can have, a bit more of a sponsor contribution, and we continue to contain our costs, we're a very lean institution. And, all of our community college peers are the leanest in the SUNY system. But we will continue to do all of our efforts to contain costs, just like any other organization.
Yes, Mr. Wild.
Mr. Chairman, I just wonder if you can help me with some math, because I know we're talking about increasing the potentially tax levy. But if I'm looking at the sheet that was passed out today, it's $13.6 billion of equalized assessed value for the county. If we were to increase, or not increase, but let's just say we did $4 million contribution to the college, what would that levy be per thousand of assessed value? And the reason why I'm asking, because I'd like to understand what the impact is of the individual taxpayer of what we're talking about. My math is right. It's 30 cents if you have $100,000 house. I don't know what. Well, my math was 0.3 cents per thousand. Is that right? So what if we did a line item tax levy to everybody in the county? Would they complain if they had $100,000, $200,000 house of paying an extra 60 cents to support the college? They would in your town, of course. I got that.
Yes, Supervisor Bramer.
That's not a good idea.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't know if we should look at it that way, but maybe someone could go through this and tell us what exactly we're looking at on this sheet,
Good sheet.
the one we got today, which apparently is the latest.
Right?
Ew, yeah.
To one minor modification, one is increasing 1% a year, the other 0.5% a year. At the end, it all adds up to the same numbers. Well, more or less, right? There should be an explanation on how to read this.
Where's the 0.5%?
Right down in the middle here.
Yep.
So if you want, I can go through this instead of doing it individually.
Yeah, please.
Who's that said? 2%, 1%, the other page. 0.5%.
Yeah, thank you.
I can. Can you pull that up on mine? Okay, and I'm going to get up over here and point things out on. It's more clear up there, but for most of the room, we'll go here. So we'll look onto the first page, make sure I'm on the right one. Okay.
That's a
Scroll.
0.5%.
Okay, in the upper left-hand corner of your sheets, it says the 2022-23 sponsorship contributions. This is what we're doing now. And I'm always gonna look over to Tammy here for affirmation on what I'm saying. Okay, our contribution this year, $2 million, Washington County, $1.6 million. Here's the percentage of the total. And here's the SUNY budget, $33 million. So you see that the total combined sponsorship contribution is just under 12%, 11.42%, okay?
And clear those, the 57 and the 42 is how we currently divide up our contribution based on the enrollment.
That's correct, that's correct. Are we all good there?
Yep.
Okay, let's go down to the next one. Current projected sponsorship contributions, assuming 2% for growth per year. This is what we're already agreed to. This is the track we have been on. And if we were not here talking about changing it, it is what we would continue to be on through the future, okay?
And you assume the same enrollment split, 57,
Correct.
42. Okay.
That's correct, yeah. Obviously, there's assumptions we have to make, so we'll stick with that. And this is what the increases are going all the way over here to 28, 29 with $5,600,000. Okay, the two together is 4.2 million. And the SUNY Adirondack budget would also be increasing, so that's 37.3 million way out here. But 15% of the budget, help me with this one, Tammy.
15% of the budget would be the $5.6 million. So
Okay.
the current percentage, we'd be paying, our current contribution is the 4.2. So we have a gap between the 4.2 million and the 5.6 million.
So that's about $1.4 million we would need to make up in additional funding if we wanted to hit the 15%. Supervisor Seaver.
Thanks Supervisor Leggett. My question is just back up to the top on the user, right? We're doing it on enrolled users. That data is based on what year? I understand that's our contribution going into next year, but that and those enrollment numbers, are they based off the 2021 or 2022 year? Because then that makes a difference for each year. There's projected growth.
I don't have that information. President Duffy, do you?
If I'm not mistaken, it's the year prior, because that's how, and then we shore up the contribution each year when we know our actual enrollment. So this would be, so 22, this year's contribution would be based on 21, 22.
Okay,
And
so
if I'm
what's
not
coming?
mistaken, then we shore that up at the end of because we were on different budget years.
That's right.
So we shore up that enrollment later in the year, and usually we're pretty done. Okay, yeah, so I'm pretty sure it's the year prior to January this year.
So 21, 22 enrolled users, assuming a 2% growth for each year of the projected under the enrollment user formula.
This is based on the percentage FTE that's contributed by each county, and that fluctuates. It's been everywhere from 64 to, it fluctuates obviously based on,
But within a range, right? Isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for illustrative purposes, everything you see here is for illustrative purposes to get the idea out. What would it cost the counties if we increased our sponsorship to hit a 15% goal? Okay, so this is where we end up through the years, that there's always a gap between the 15% and in the 28, 29, we're $1.4 million shy. How do we make up that $1.4 million? Well, let's here, Tammy, on this line, sponsorship percentage, and now this is going up on 1% at a time on the front sheet here. So should we make any comments on this at this time, Tammy?
That would be they're looking at, and correct me, Dr. Duffy, I believe the next fiscal year they're looking at for the school, it would be their 2023, 2024 year. So this first rendition is going from the 11.42% up to 12% for that year. And then 1% thereafter. And these were just numbers thrown out. It doesn't, with really no method behind it other than trying to get the college up to the 15% max.
That's right. So if we take that gap and work it to hit 15% within about 3 years' time, that's what we need to make up. Now, how do we make up that amount of money? Well, sponsorship increase 1% per year up to the request are calculated using the equalized full value of the counties. And down in the bottom corner here, you'll see what our equalized full values are and their relative proportions, okay? So now using those equalized full values here to come up with this number, the 196.67, this is how we split. To get up to the 12%, Warren puts in an extra 133,000, Washington County puts up an extra 63,000. And we keep running that all the way over. And we were hitting 15% about at this point here. So to hit 15% in 27, 28, we'd be looking at an increase over what it is today of 890,000 for us, 420,000 for Washington. Any questions on that? Supervisor Seaver.
I do, just comparatively to the user then, in that scenario, Washington County goes down in every scenario. Warren County goes up. In this one, Washington County. This is compared to the use. In every one of these scenarios, Washington County goes down and we go up. Is that pretty
No.
much it? So the user scenario, it looks like Washington County goes down.
Can we scroll up here, Sammy?
Right.
So here we have on our usership, sponsor contributions as we are right now. Washington County 1.6, 1.67, 1.7, 1.75.
Right, I'm sorry, just down to the percentage line there, sponsorship percentage, right there. Up a little. Right there. Sponsorship totals.
15, 14, etc.
I don't know what the question is.
Sponsorship totals, is that what?
Well, right, I mean, my question is in user, if you're assuming 2% growth each year off the numbers and the percentage has changed for Warren County versus Washington County, in essence, then Warren County is gonna grow in every year. But theoretically, the percentage of contribution from Washington County would go down.
It's a 2% increase every year.
Right.
So, right.
But because it would change, it would be less for Washington. They would eventually see less.
I'm looking for help here.
Their increase is based upon what this is doing is it's taking out, your 2% is always going to be based upon your full-time equivalents, your students. The difference between the getting to the 15%.
Yeah.
And what that 2% gets you is based upon your equalized full value. They'll always increase, and those increases are being right now based upon the equalized full value that's on the bottom of your sheet. So their figures are increasing. Is there a math that's wrong perhaps? I mean, I didn't think there was. I don't see, it looks like they're all increasing.
Yeah.
Now, I did add based upon a conversation quickly with Supervisor Conover when we stepped into the room this afternoon. He asked what he wanted to see is at the end of all of this, he wanted to compare apples to apples. So this one column here, these figures you don't have on your sheet.
Okay.
But basically I'm sorry, maybe that's it. Is that it? Is that the number that you were, okay?
I'm not saying the same thing, and maybe it's just me, but.
So this figure rate, these right here, what he wanted to see is, this is the increase based upon equalizable value. If we
Okay.
still stayed at 15%, we based everything on full-time equivalent, what does that look like? And it's this, again, it's the bottom line, it's the same number. But this is what that split would look like if we based it upon full-time equivalents, and I apologize.
Okay.
This column was added, you're right, the numbers look strange in this column because this is trying to compare apples to apples. If in 28, 29, the increase that the difference we're trying to make up to get to 15% is $1.3 million. This is what that looks like if you base just that increase percentage on equalizable value.
Okay, yeah.
And now basing it on full-time equivalent, this is what it looks like, and this is the difference.
Okay. Can that be sent out to us?
Sure. I can,
Because that-
it's, again, it's just it's the one last column, but absolutely, I can send all of this out. Yep, I apologize.
Chairman thinks it might help me a bit.
Well,
Why don't we increase just 2% a year? Where did that come from? Is it because what we do every year? And that was in agreement?
No, I think it come from the state's tax cap. I think that's why it's at.
Oh, the state, okay, came from the tax cap. So it has nothing to do with inflation, nothing to do with anything else. It's just tax cap.
2% is the tax.
And
cap.
we're going backwards with the college in terms of our support because it's limited to 2%.
Yeah, I would say all the time. Yes,
Is there something in our agreement with Washington County that says we're not going to increase more than 2%?
not that I'm aware of, no.
No, I don't.
The agreement is based on
So-
based on the FTE, it has nothing to do with the 2%. The 2% has just been kind of what people have been comfortable because of the tax cap that was implemented several years ago. We were advised by, county leaders that that would be about the tolerance level. But there's nothing in your agreement with Washington County that states anything about 2%. The only agreement that you have is how your sponsor contribution is split. And currently that's split by FTE.
Warren and Washington County could agree to raise it 6%. And,
Seems like the fairest thing to do. Let's raise it up a little bit.
that's another option.
It's not something that's on the sheet.
Correct.
I think this, to me, this is awfully complicated. I can't figure out what the delta is from doing it this way versus doing it another way. And I think it's gonna be hard to negotiate with the county, other county. Find a simple way to do it. What if we take it to 2.5% for the next couple of years? What would that do? I don't know. It's, it's kind of the numbers. And we can't really move forward without getting a sense of what Washington County might be doing. Right? So are they going to agree to this kind of scenario? Like, what do we think is going to be the easiest way to get us both to agree to something?
Want me to finish up those spreadsheets? That's what
Yes.
you're about?
please.
Okay. So, and. Cameron, we could put a delta between these two numbers here, right? To see what the. Just mathematically, so formula.
Can I ask a question? On
Yes.
the assumptions, did you use the 6732 on the equalized full value the whole way through the 5 years, or did you do some sort of thing to project a change over time?
We did not.
Life value,
Yeah, but between the two counties
less, we use 2023 as equalized.
and just plopped it into each. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, it would be almost impossible to try to project how our two counties would change.
That's correct. And to go back with the chairman's first question is, we need the conceptual approval. So it's for our committees to basically at least to get that far. This is just one possible option out there. As Supervisor Wild had put out, there's another option right there, because forget the 2%, let's do 2.5%, let's do increasing 2 3/4 next year and get up to 3% and somehow get there, but the idea is that that the two counties together increase their sponsorship percentage of the SUNY Adirondack annual operating budget.
Equally.
Fairly,
Barely.
that's right.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, but just so everyone understands that that table with that differential is exclusively related to the increase and the increase alone. Just so we're clear. Okay, all right. It does not,
We're still gonna be paying 2.4 million in that last year.
well, the question is under the existing dollars, what do you do with the existing dollars? That's another matter, but in terms of the increase, just the increase of that dollar amount. That's the differential, what is it, 141,000
Right.
in 5 years. So just so we're clear, that's what it is, the increase. If you moved from population to assessed value
To a blend
On the
of,
increase.
on the increase, on the
increase.
increase.
Correct. Correct. To accelerate to get to that 15%. The other thing is that we just asked the college not to increase their budget from year to year, and we'll just catch up there as well. Okay, so now by county sponsorship to 15% by 26, 27. Here.
Can't figure this out. Yeah, pretty good with that.
Okay, so we're starting right here, right now, 23, 24, so let's go down. I'm gonna look on the bottom row. Right,
Now, you can't quite see all the numbers. Okay, yeah, now you can see all the numbers. It's the 2,16537 plus the 133,606.
okay, you got that? So here is our full-time equivalent. Here is our equalized values combined together. Is that right? It comes to that, okay? So this is the total value of the full-time equivalents and the equalized value share comes to 2,350,000. And then we run that all the way across.
And just so we're clear again,
Yep.
correct me if I'm wrong, but that's assuming the existing contribution in the existing contribution formula stays as is.
That's correct.
So if the existing contribution formula stays as is, then that would be, and the increase were to be adjusted based on assessed value, that would be the dollar amount. Okay,
So this would be the check we'd be writing every year to SUNY Adirondack. And over the course of these years, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it would go up approximately $1 million. And for Washington County, it would go up approximately $540,000. So those are the explanation of the numbers that are before you. Any questions? And I'd say we can open it up to discussion. Thank you. Let's stay here to point anything out or,
Is there a second sheet or am I
oh,
crazy?
yes, no, there is a second sheet. Only difference is here we were going, the second sheet has it going by 0.5% per year.
Okay, got that. Got it. Yep,
Okay.
yep. Okay,
So it's just another way to look at it. And it'll take us a little longer
right.
to get to the 15. First one got us to 15% several years earlier. But the last column is what we're looking at for 5 years out. So just for easier discussion, 5 years from now, where we're going to be, what's it going to look like.
Okay, just bear with me 1 second, Chairman. Just, I have a question on the 0.5%. the increase. Why is the increase so much more? I think there might be an error there.
In the first year. It's because we're going from 11.42 to 2.5 versus 11.42 to 2. Well. That's why.
Say it again. You're going to
So
11.
those percentages, you do pretty much anything you want with it.
Yeah.
So the first spreadsheet, we were going from 11.42, which is our current percentages based on full-time equivalent, up to 12.5 in 23-24.
Yeah.
And the reason I use that number was simply to get us, if you take 0.5 every year, to get us to 15 before the spreadsheet printed out, because that was the ask. It's truly, it was that
Okay.
technical. So that's why you see that first year, the 23-24, a larger jump that year in this spreadsheet than you did in the last spreadsheet. But any of them,
This one you're going, sorry, just in the second one where it only goes up by 0.5%.
yes.
You went from 11.4 to 12.5.
12.5.
But in
Yeah,
the first one, you only went up to 12.
right, yes.
Why can't we start at 12?
You can do
On
it,
half.
it is, you can go any.
We would need a bigger piece of paper.
Well, all I was trying to do.
I'm okay with that. The county is gonna be here in 10 years. I hope. Make the spreadsheet bigger.
Any other
Thank you.
questions on the spreadsheets at this time? Supervisor Seaver?
We used to have a document, like a multi-year plan that was presented to us every year. Has this been factored into that, like, so we could see what that impact looks like on all of our other obligations?
No, because this is initial discussion stage right now.
Well, right, but just the, what if on how we have to move other things around?
We can always plug it in, but no. You can always plug it in.
Is our 5-year plan up to date? Is it being kept?
It's up to date as of 2020. Yeah. Okay. Just recently updated with the budget.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah, I want to say, because I think some people might be getting confused, because I know I was initially. These numbers are cast based exclusively on the increase. If, like as Supervisor Bramer saying, if you were to adopt the more conservative formula, then these numbers would come down, of course, and spread further over time. On the other side, there are those that if you were to take all the costs and put it on assessed value basis, then the numbers would increase much more dramatically. And I think that the initial spreadsheet that was handed out at the last committee meeting before we decided to have this workshop meeting did that. And that's the difference, just so you know, so yes, that would be more of an increase and for Warren County and less for our partner, of course. This, on the other hand, is looking at the increase.
Well, that leads to the question, what happens after 5 years? What's the formula then?
That's a very good question.
Because then it's how do you calculate that? You got full-time equivalents and you got just equalized value for 5 years. What happens? You're number 6.
We can go back to enrollment only, because we'll be at 15%.
So you just stay as it leaves.
Right.
Yeah, but we will have caught up at that point. Assuming we don't fall behind with respect to our other college communities around the state and have a problem there again.
Yeah, that makes sense. We'll have caught up and then we just have to keep it.
You're gonna have to look at it then. At that point in time.
Yes, Mr. Wall.
Chairman, thank you. I still am curious about Washington County and what they might do. So in terms of our negotiations, I'm looking at the next to last page. I always hand it out. there's something called chargebacks. We do really well with chargebacks. As a matter of fact, Saratoga County and their chargebacks gives us more than we contribute. So if we can't get along and figure out a reasonable compromise with Washington County, what if we just took the overall total responsibility and did the chargebacks, and would that help reduce some of our burden?
That might go into what the chart.
So, I mean, this discussion comes up every year almost. What if we weren't a sponsor and we just follow the same, scenario that all the other counties do in terms of. And there's a couple scenarios. I mean, there are some community colleges in the state, well, only one really, that's a regional community college. So Corning Community College doesn't have a sponsor. They have 3 counties, I think, that come together and they agree what their contribution is going to be. So that is a model that exists within CUP. Every time we've run the scenario, and Washington County has asked this probably more than Warren County, like, hey, what if we just weren't a sponsor and we just paid the chargeback rate? It always ended up being more than what their sponsor contribution was. And you really then forfeit any real ownership of the college. Right now, you own our property. You entrusted to the college to operate the college on that property. You're not a sponsor. You have none of that. That would be a big deal for the county to say we no longer want to sponsor the college. We just want to pay a per head chargeback. So that would be a much bigger, longer conversation, because now you're as the college was originally formulated based on a sponsorship of both Warren and Washington County. The question always comes up to, well, why don't we ask Saratoga to be a sponsor? They will not do that. Saratoga County has really 3 different colleges that serve their county, and so they're not going to choose one over the other. So that comes up every once in a while too. So all of those discussions can be had. There are just like any big decision like that, there are unintended consequences, and those are all things that you have to weigh.
Supervisor Driscoll.
Thank you, Chairman. At one of the recent workshops that we had at college, I asked a question, I think relating to the chargeback scenario. And I had been up to the college for a health and wellness fair and spoke to a lot of students. And I spoke to one student in particular who was from a very small town in Washington County. And I think 3 or 4 generations of family members had lived in that town. She was a full-time student at the college, was working in Glens Falls, and within the last 6 months had rented an apartment in the city of Glens Falls. So I think my question at that time was, where is she from? Is she from this small rural town in Washington County, or did she get counted as a resident of Warren County? Certainly, I'm guessing that she purchases most of her goods and services from Warren County, in Warren County. But I don't know that for a fact. But if you start adding all of those individuals, even from neighboring communities, Hudson Falls and Fort Edward, who move over to Glens Falls and Queensbury and other communities in Warren County in order to be closer to possibly closer to college or employment opportunities, how does that weigh into the decision making as far as where they're from? So I don't know that would be an efficient way of doing it, but that's just my thinking.
Supervisor Seaver.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I'm just wondering when the last time was we had a dialogue with Saratoga County about it, because the idea of a regional college, we recognize the majority of the sponsorships are coming, those chargebacks are coming from Saratoga County. Saratoga also has, for those of you that haven't been there, a beautiful branch campus, like knock your socks off branch campus location in Wilton. And you know, if you're looking at a regional college and you're splitting it 3 ways instead of a community college, you're splitting 2. It may be beneficial across the board in what they're paying for chargebacks, but also what we're all looking at contributing. I think it's worth, at least now that our county administrator is on board, having a discussion with Saratoga County and seeing how they feel about it, because that is something that I don't remember in the 10 years I've been around, us having that dialogue with Saratoga as a county board to another county, and including Chairman Hall, and just having those administrators and chairs have a discussion about it. I think there's something to be said for the fact that years ago, we don't call ACC anymore. You never hear us say it's our local Adirondack Community College. We call it SUNY Adirondack. And with that, I would have hoped that the state would have contributed more money towards the efforts of SUNY. And I guess what I hear is sometimes they do, and some of the tuition for those that qualify, but for those that don't, they're not. But at the end of the day, is there a way to have a discussion with Saratoga? And if there's still a no-go and Washington County's a no-go, at least we've explored that option before you look at a substantial increase from just Warren County residents to pay for a community college. If I could just get an answer to that, have there been discussions with Saratoga?
I'm aware of, no.
Okay, so just throwing out an option.
No.
Thank you.
I did ask about that sometime in 2022, and Ryan Moore was here at the time. You know, was in administration in Saratoga County, and basically there hadn't been discussions for a long time. He didn't think it would go anywhere, but I still think it's valuable to try. The only thing for us would be, we want to make sure that we still get as much from Saratoga in charge in their contributions as we do now, is that we get in chargebacks, which is way more than we contribute currently.
The only reason for them to do it is to save money.
Right.
It's not
But
probably
it's,
gonna
it
happen.
might not be that great for us, so, but I think it's worth a conversation to see, I mean, if they're willing, they do have a beautiful campus in their county. And they always have more money available than us in sales tax and things like that, so I think that's a worthwhile endeavor. On this particular thing, if we're only looking at trying to make this happen in 5 years, I don't know why we can't try to do that in this coming fiscal year and jump us up to at least jump us to the 12% at the 0.5% increase that's on the second sheet. But again, we don't know what Washington County is thinking, so maybe that's a. I thought when we had this discussion, whenever it was at the college, that we were gonna have a joint committee or task force from the 2 counties of people getting together. Have they seen these spreadsheets? Is anyone on their side working on this that we could go and talk to and say, this is what we're thinking?
Think, Mr. Chairman, if I may answer that, look at the discussion we're having here right now on getting our ducks in a row as Warren County itself. Are we on board with the 15%? Yes or no? So it's a little premature to sit down at Washington County and saying, we're here to negotiate an increase, maybe, not sure if the rest of the board or anybody is up there. And they are going to be in the same position as well, because essentially we're asking them to put in more money. And they have to go and look at it. So the idea being that we start the conversation here and we move it forward. There's going to be more iterations of this, but what is the Personnel, Higher Education, and Finance Committee comfortable with to be able to move it forward onto a combined table and then see what they have to say. So we should have a certain amount of confidence before going forward.
I agree. Well,
Mr. Chairman, thanks. Another question for Chris, if you don't mind. Chris, have we ever been at 15%? Our contribution?
No, I don't believe so.
We've always been less than that. Thanks.
yes, Supervisor Hogan.
Let me back up by saying I support the equalized ed. However, internally, if we are going to commit to the formula
with the based on assessed value. Are we gonna do anything within this county to make sure that each community within Warren County is pulling their fair share? Because we have a wide range of assessment across the county at this point. You see what I'm saying? Right now, if we go with this formula, Bolton, Queensbury, you're bearing the brunt of it. Are we gonna do anything to compel all the communities within the county to pull their fair share?
Mr. Gunn.
Well, I mean, that asks the proverbial question, you know, which all taxing jurisdictions, federal, state, and local counties attempt to address, which is fair share. And, you know, the idea being let each pay according to their means is called a means test. And so with the federal government, your means test is based on income, right? Here, we are fortunate enough to be applying a means test based on property value. And now we all know the inefficiencies and disparities of that as it's applied. But that is the means test. That's the means test by which you put your budget together. The county puts its budget together, et cetera, et cetera. I think that, and we've never heard, I don't believe this representative from Bolton, we pay our almost 16%. That's our fair share. How much of the system we use, it's not the question. The question is, that's our fair share. We accept that. Some of us. So I think though that to really deal with this question, sincerely, I think that what I think that the originators of this, what was foremost in their mind was, how do we get to college from point A to point B? How do we do that? And so they advanced an idea, right? And I think, to be candid, I think that part of their thinking was that, well, relative to the means test, that maybe Warren County should do more. Larger assessed value, right? A lower tax rate, whatever metric you want to apply. I'm not saying it's fair. I'm just saying when you think of it in those terms. And I think that I think, and I think their thinking was in advancing this was that by doing this, it's basically, you make somebody an offer they can't refuse. In other words, 5 years out, you're not paying that much more, and it's really a lot of this is shifted over onto Warren County, right? Because when the moment you go from the user system to the assessed value system, it's a 10%, approximately a 10% shift, right? So on, I don't have the number right there in front of me, but like, for example, on $3.8 million, that's $380,000. Right there, 10%, bang. And so that one thing that showed that how much the increase was, if you were to take all of it, put it all on assessed value, you can tack another 380 on that. You see my point? If you were going to do that, and there might be those that maybe think that's a grand idea. So there's a lot of different iterations, a lot of different things here, but I think that fundamentally, I think the point is, is this important that we get to college to this point in time? And if so, what's possible, and financially and politically and geographically, and I think it's a significant challenge. I think it's a significant challenge. But I think the question we have to address is, what are we prepared to do?
That was what my question.
We will do our fair share.
Supervisor Bramer.
Well, just on fair share and real property means test, it gets you to thinking, well, what are we doing as a county on our sales tax distribution? But in any event, I do think that we could come up with a way, even if we can't come up with an agreement with Washington County to look at giving the college some increase in this next year based on this formula. trying to stepwise make improvements. I mean, I personally would like to see the sheet updated, with the 0.5% increase for 2023, 24. And if that means going out another year, which it looks like it would, to get us 15%, so we can print this on bigger pieces of paper.
But
Well, that's one way to go, or we could just, the sponsors could just agree to contribute 6% more each year and it'll take a couple more years to get to your number, but we'll get there.
Mhm.
And it'll stay just the way it is, and then we'll pay 57%. They'll pay 40, whatever it is, 42%.
And then, of course, you do,
That simplifies.
you may have to deal with and likely deal with the question that, no, we can't do that. We're not prepared to do that, in which case, then the question comes back to, how do you get to college from point A and point B?
Well, we don't know that, though.
No, we don't know that. And maybe that's, you know, that is the basis of some discussion with,
Are you committed to that?
that's the question. I think we have to ask that question ourselves first, and then I think I would agree with you on that.
That comes down to the primary question that you had asked in the beginning, Mr. Chairman.
Do we want to do this or don't?
That's right.
I think we're obligated personally, but that's just my opinion.
It's good consensus.
If we're talking about the increase, and the increase only, I think that, I don't think that this is, I think it's reasonable.
I'm over here, would that be mine? As a supervisor from a community for whom SUNY Adirondack is the only avenue to higher education, I asked this committee to seriously consider reaching 15% as soon as is feasibly possible.
Finance committee members, anybody else? Up or down? Go towards 15%?
We're back to where we were. How do we get there?
Let's gamble on the growth potential of Washington County.
Are we saying that we're locking it into 15%?
No, I don't think we're.
I think that's important.
That's the goal.
That's the right, that's the goal.
Supportive of that. The other part is how we get. That's right.
Yes, Mr. Diamond.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not prepared to commit to locking into the 15% at this point in time. Supervisor Wild brings up a very interesting point that I think we really need to have that discussion with Washington County and find out where they're at. I mean, we presented several options. I think everybody understands in the room. They would like to help SUNY Adirondack in some form or manner. We've talked about 3 or 4 different options. But I really want to find out what their position is and what their willingness is to do for us to advance this. So that's kind of where I'm at this point in time.
Yeah, I think we are at that point, really. No, they were quite ecstatic about us going to equalized value and picking up the cost, basically.
Well, if you go to equalized value, Bolton, Queensbury, Glens Falls is going to provide about 70% of the increase to SUNY. And, you know, we've talked about our percentages over the past, and I'm willing to pay our fair share. But I really think we're at a point, a juncture where we need to sit down and talk to those folks, whether it's half a dozen members of this joint committee, however you want to formulate that, and start to have that discussion with the idea of getting some more funding to Sudi and Rhonda in the future.
And I think we need to be rather prompt about this.
Yeah.
Because
I agree.
they have a budget that's coming up here shortly. And they probably want to know one way or another.
And I think you need to state the goal, right? Is it to get to 15% at some point? Obviously not right now, but. So that's what.
Anybody have any objection to that? Any other suggestions or comments? Yes,
So as it relates to the capital projects, that's gonna remain untouched. We're leaving that formula the way that it is. But everyone, can we just get some data on that, please, just on what we've contributed towards that over the last 5-10 years here in Washington County, so that at least we have that. I know we've worked really hard with some of those contributions. We should be very proud of that. But I know we've also paid significantly more than Washington County and right, because it's based on assessed value. So to say we've never done anything more than this, I mean, we have tried. And I think it's a great goal. I hope it's one that our budget can afford. But I do think it's important that we are all well aware of what we have contributed above and beyond Washington County as well. And I look forward to just hearing what Saratoga thinks about a possible regional idea.
Mr. Chairman, who's gonna reach out to Washington County? I'd like to know who's gonna be on the hook to make this happen.
probably be myself. Look at it.
So, and look for volunteers. For the county administrator. I really don't have any interest in participating in it, but I'm sure if we make it a smaller group of people. we can get
Okay, if there's nothing else,
Yeah.
we have a motion to adjourn. Seconded by Supervisor Bruno. Call the question. All in favor?
This is our last meeting before the holidays. Happy holidays.
Merry Christmas. Happy New Year.
What they were doing.